Yes, yeah, it's got
Right.
a pseudonym, Debs McCart.
I think that given that Elaine is here and we've got our guests here, we should probably get started. Charlotte, could you concentrate on trying to get Debs into the webinar? And I'm now operating off my phone, so I've got a bit of a weird view here, and I can't see the Q&A. So I'm in your hands, Charlotte, for
Okay.
stuff. Okay, Elaine, welcome.
Okay.
So what I normally say at the start of these webinars, I talk about the fact that it's live and we might, be interrupted at some point. The signal might drop out, and well, it's live and things happen. Elaine, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, Debs can join us shortly. We have shared some questions in advance, but I do tend to freestyle a little bit. Elaine, perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about maybe let's think about the art first of all. So how long have you been an artist?
I think I've always painted and drawn. I've always been quite creative. So always used to watch Heartbeat and do all whatever projects he set on that show, and it's kind of just progressed from there. I did it up to GCSE, and then after GCSE it was kind of just for fun until I had my children. And I did a bit of a U-turn. So my first degree is in medicine. I stopped working when I had my kids, and I think I don't know, it gives you a different perspective on life, having children, and a bit of an opportunity to look into something that I really loved and really wanted to do. So I did a fine art degree part-time when the kids were tiny. And yeah, it's just escalated.
Well, it's escalated a lot. I've got one of Elaine's awesome prints, which is on the wall of my living room. It reminds me of a special night out running the Bob Graham in winter. It's the Helvellyn picture. I know it has a special name, but I can't remember what it is. Do you remember, Elaine?
Yeah, I can't feel my face.
That's it. Yes.
When I was really cold, it was after a really cold sort of recce across the tops, and I love it, and it gives you that kind of frozen face.
Yeah. Obviously, your art is inspired absolutely by your experiences. Do you know when you're in the mountains and you see that moment? Do you know instantly that's a picture you're going to paint, or do they grow on you over time?
I think there's certain places, particularly in the lakes, because that's where I kind of train a lot, where I just love to go. There's certain, certain scenes that I just really love. So I kind of know it will come eventually, but a lot of them are reflected on the weather and how I feel at the moment as well. So there's one that I did from Great Carver, kind of looking on the back of Skiddaw. And it was just as a storm was coming. So there's thunder and lightning, and the clouds just went really, really dark. And yeah, that was a scene that I painted after that. My memory was trying to escape the storm, running off the back of Great Carver into safety.
Oh, that's is that kind of inspiration, I guess, is very visceral and stays with you. Charlotte, I'm just going to jump back and see how we're doing with Debs. I can see.
Yeah, she's just messaged saying that her camera and her mic are live. Where is she? So I'm just trying to find her. I can't see her on the screen. I'm just sending her an email as well, just to see if it may just be worth turning your computer off and restarting. I wonder if you've just got your camera open on a different app on your laptop, so it's not allowing you to use it on Teams.
Okay, we'll keep going, and hopefully Debs can join us, because Debs is our original artist in residence. And maybe I should just take a step back for everybody and explain a little bit where the inspiration for this from an event point of view came from. And I've known Debs McCart for a very long time, 20 or so years, through the climbing world, and I was fortunate to stay in her house about 2 years ago, and I saw her amazing pictures and paintings, and I thought, wow, these are amazing, and some of them were real kind of action photos, and I thought, wow, Debs could definitely paint pictures of our races. And she's been a regular participant and a regular event team member, so I asked her, would you like the grand voluntary title of artist in residence? And Debs came to Dragon's Back Race in 2023 as our first go at it, and it was fantastic to have Debs's pictures appearing at the end of each day, some amazing watercolors, and we ended up with this little kind of art gallery at the end of the event. And I asked Debs and Elaine whether they would join us at Cape Wrath this year, and they were both able to come. And you've got very different styles, so I think they're quite complementary ways of event, and they make it seem very special. Maybe Elaine, you could talk a bit more about the style, because you will understand. I've suddenly got an echo on the line.
Is it?
Okay. Elaine, maybe you could just talk about the different styles that you have compared to Debs, because they're completely different.
Well, for a start, I don't paint people. It's a major difference. So I'm more landscape based. Debs is portraiture and people. She does sort of pen and ink and watercolors, and I do sort of acrylics of landscapes. So quite impressionistic, I think.
Yes, and they definitely get that sense of, I used the word visceral earlier, and that I Can't Feel My Face print I have absolutely gets that kind of sense across. I feel very unqualified to talk about art. So this is kind of a new realm for me. Maybe Elaine, you can talk about the experience. Sorry, that's Debs'
I think Debs,
phone.
can you hear us, Debs? Can we hear you?
And what I was going to ask is whether, Elaine, you could talk about the practical experience of painting at the events, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, so that was amazing. So my inspiration is the mountains. So I usually go out on training days, and there'll be certain images, and I'll take loads of photos when I'm there. But I haven't really spent loads and loads of time actually in location. So actually running into certain spots on the Cape Wrath course, the spots that I really loved from when I ran it the year before. So those, I don't know, those specific spots each day, running into those and being to just sit and enjoy it and take it all in and paint as well. It was absolutely amazing. Amazing week.
Brilliant. Debs, we can see you. This is fantastic. We can. That's good.
I can't see Debs.
So I can see Debs
Can
on
you
my
see Debs?
screen
This is wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Debs,
yeah.
are you able to talk to us? Let's try that. So we can't hear Debs. We can't hear you.
Now.
Oh, yes.
Yay!
On
my phone.
Okay, so eventually we have a full house. We have 2 presenters and 2 guests and all of our attendees. So it's only 7:22, but we're there. That's great.
We got there in the end. I might spotlight just bear with me while I get everybody, because I've got 3 pages of people at the moment.
Debs, how much of the last 20 minutes have you heard in terms of me talking about and introducing?
I've been listening to it all, apart from briefly when I went out and came back in again.
Okay, wonderful. Well, perhaps I could kind of ask that kind of question to you about how you got into art, and yeah, I mean, what was your journey?
So kind of a bit like Elaine, when I was young at school, I've always liked doing art, always been creative. And then because I was good at science, I kind of went into a science career, and art took a bit of a back seat. I did get back into it when I had my kids, because I was often like helping them with art projects. They would get bored and wander off, and I'd finish the art project. So I've always liked making things and drawing and painting. As I say, it took me when the kids were young, and then now that I've retired, I've just got more time and I'm just enjoying it all over again.
Wonderful. I think maybe now we've got both of you in the webinar, I might just swap one question then back to the other. So I'm going to go back to Elaine and ask about how kind of your experience as a runner informs and motivates you as an artist, and kind of what's the connection between the two?
So I love both of my passions, so to sort of amalgamate them is just amazing. But I suppose I go to the fells for a bit of headspace, for the peace and calm. I just love being in nature, and well, I can't do that all the time, unfortunately. So when I get home, it's kind of, I don't know, it's putting down on canvas those experiences that I've had, and just seeing the different, I don't know, how the light affects the landscapes and how my emotions on the specific days have kind of affected it as well. So yeah, they're quite intertwined.
Brilliant. And Deb, same question to you. And I think you've obviously had a bit of a journey with Cape Wrath as a participant and as an artist. So maybe you could elaborate on that if you would like.
Oh, well, again, like Elaine, I love being outdoors. I've always loved that. I have a slightly different style, as Elaine alluded to before. I love doing is capturing people. I spent a long time being a portrait and event photographer, and so that was very easy and quick to capture somebody, just by pressing the shutter. But what I like about painting people is it's much more mindful. I kind of do two kinds. Portraiture I do quite a lot of, but not doing races. And that's been a kind of a journey for me. When I started it, I was just pleased that I made somebody look human. A lot of practice. And then the other side of things is, I think, stems from, because I studied podiatry, and when I did that, I had to study an awful lot of anatomy. I've got a real affinity with the way the body works and moves, and everybody's different. So you'll see somebody running down a hillside, and you'll know who it is, and you won't be able to see their face just by their gait, the way they run, the way they hold themselves. And I like trying to capture that. Particularly at Cape Wrath this year, I did a lot of sort of quick sketches of people, and not always showing their faces, but most people seem to recognise, oh, that's me, and that gave me a lot of joy. So
I certainly know what you mean about the gaits, because I know my regular running buddies, I can spot the person running in the distance, and before you're close enough to recognise them, I recognise the gait and I go, oh, that's so and so. It's quite funny. Try to do impressions of them sometimes, but it's never quite the same.
Because you don't have their body.
No, not at all. Maybe Elaine, I can ask you a little bit about kind of, we've jumped straight in with the art. Maybe let's just take a step back and talk about the running, because you're an extremely accomplished runner yourself. You've done the Spine and Northern Traverse and Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath, and I mean, you've been on the podium, all of those, most of those, I think. How I guess if you just tell us about your journey as a runner. Is it something you've always done?
Yeah, so again, at school, I used to love PE, was probably my favourite, along with art. And I did cross countries. I wasn't very good, but I really enjoyed them. And I did 1500 meters track races. I had a big spell when I went to university where I just went dancing on a Saturday night and didn't do much sort of great exercise. And then again, having had children, I just felt really unfit. So Harry was 6 months old and I bought a treadmill, and I just go out and do 20 minutes every night on the treadmill just to get a bit of peace and quiet once they've gone to sleep. And I think I entered the Great North Run was my first kind of race back, and that was like the sole race that I did for quite a long time. Then we moved to Durham and I joined the Elphet Striders and met some guys that did the Bob Graham round and lots of off-road running, and that's kind of how I've got into trail and kind of fell running. I did my BG in 2018 and again it's just kind of escalated from there. I love being outside and I love exploring. I like these mountainous landscapes.
I think probably most people in this webinar will identify with those motivations. And Debs, same question to yourself about your kind of journey as a runner.
Well, first thing, I still don't really think of myself as a runner. I kind of started I did sport at school, hockey and netball and all that kind of stuff, and so obviously I ran on court, but I never did any running. And then I kind of got into my parents, so we went on lots of walks, and that gave me the enjoyment of the countryside. And then I just did longer and longer hiking, really. Lots of Munros, lots of walking in the Lake District. And then later in life, after I'd had the 3 kids, Mel and I, as my husband, we used to go out to the local fell races. Just kind of anything between 5 and 10 kilometres. And because the kids were young, we kind of just took it in turns. So Mel would have the 3 kids and I'd do the race. And then next time we'd swap over. And I'll tell you something, doing the race was a lot easier than looking after 3 kids under 7 at 8. We used to kind of fight for who would do the race. And then it just kind of, as the kids got older and I got more time, just did longer races. But I was never really a racer. I was a kind of just a completer. And I still don't feel like a racer. But I enjoy the challenge of doing longer and longer stuff. And that's kind of how my kind of running, in inverted commas, has kind of developed really from long distance hiking into having hit the cutoffs. Yeah.
I think maybe we'll come back to the cutoffs. Elaine, perhaps you could just talk about some of your experiences about kind of racing at Northern Traverse and what it's like to be out there in the dark and the journey across kind of the north of England, because the Northern Traverse seems to have captured lots of people's imagination, and certainly entries for next year sold out or super quick. The race is oversubscribed, and that's, as an organizer, that's fantastic. But there's something that's kind of changed in people's awareness of the race and desire to do the race. And I guess having done it, maybe you could share a little bit about the experience.
I think for a start, it's just that traversing the country from one coast to the other is really amazing. It's it's a nice point-to-point journey in itself. The sections of it are really different and really beautiful. So the lakes, obviously, I love. Then it's the Dales, isn't it? Which has also got lots of lovely bits. So I've done quite a few races in the Dales, in Swaledale. And then there's a bit of a section which I'm not so keen on. And then you hit the, what's it called? The Cleveland Way. Yeah,
the North York Moors.
North York Moors. And that's, it's a great journey. I suppose in distance wise, it feels quite manageable compared to something like the Spine. It's slightly shorter. April, so it's slightly better weather, hopefully, although this year wasn't. And for me, I only had one night that, yeah, I think that's right. No, would it be 2 nights, wouldn't it?
Saturday night, Sunday night, finish
Yeah.
on the Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first night was great. I don't usually have much problem on that first night. And I joined up with a guy called Dave Beals, which was lovely. So we kept each other company until just before Richmond. The second night was awful because I think I tried to sleep at Richmond and couldn't get to sleep because I always get a cough, like an ultra cough.
Yeah.
And I think it was quite cold and windy that year, so it kind of made it worse. So I couldn't get any sleep. Started getting bad hallucinations, tried to sleep on a bench, and it was too cold for that. I hadn't recce'd the 2 sections that were in the nighttime. I hadn't recce'd those 2 bits, which was a major mistake. And that bit from Richmond, I kept kind of going off on the wrong side of the fence line where the footpath was and having to backtrack. And yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, so that's the Vale of York, which for people who don't know, there's, I think it's 30 is it 30 miles or 30 kilometers, certainly kilometers at least, of completely flat farmland between the end of the Yorkshire Dales and the start of the North York Moors. And yeah, it can be, although it's simple terrain, what's confusing is being on the right path in a field, and one field looks the same as another field.
So I looked at the map beforehand and thought, that's all right, that's low down, that's near all the villages and things, that'll be fine. And it was so wrong.
Yeah, it's 30 kilometers. I'm just thinking back to when I recce'd the route and I walked that section in a day, and I wouldn't have, because it was winter when I recce'd it, so I wouldn't have done 50 miles, 30 kilometers sorry, yeah, definitely 30 kilometers. Debs, maybe I can ask you about Cape Wrath, because you are a veteran of that race as a event team member and as a participant. What is it about Cape Wrath that has been special for you, I guess?
Well, it's been a kind of a long journey for me, in that I saw the film about Cape Wrath at the Sheffield Adventure Film Festival back in 2019, and just something about the film just grabbed me. I love Scotland, and I just thought, what an amazing way to kind of experience the remoteness, the wildness, without having to kind of logistically do it myself. Having said that, I went on Dragon's Back to volunteer to earn some credits, and in 2019, and then immediately went straight up to Cape Wrath and recce'd the whole thing on my own, with staying in bothies and having a tent. Did it in 14 days. And although I've effectively done the Cape Wrath 3 times now, right of the race, and then lots of other recce's as well. To be honest, I think my absolute favourite was that 14-day traverse on my own, doing breaking the really long days up into shorter sections. But it's just so beautiful, and you just feel really special being able to be in some of those places that very few people ever get to. And so go on.
I was just going to say, I've always felt that as a race organizer, you learn much more about the route by walking it rather than running it. And there's a time when you need to run it. And I've actually, this time last week, was running one of the new race routes for Skyline Scotland 2025. And actually running it in a one, start to finish, the whole route. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's actually quite a hard race, this. Yeah, so you learn stuff by running too, but absolutely, in terms of taking in the landscape and experiencing the weather and the terrain and everything else, I think there's a lot to be said for walking. Maybe Elaine, a question to you: when you're recceing pre-race, do you go out to run? Do you go out to walk?
Oh, it's usually to run. Yeah. So my experience of Cape Wrath this year was amazing, because it was taking the time, and just absorbing each section rather than, watching the route on the map and making sure that you're on the right line and going as fast as you can as well. So yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. So when Elaine, you were at Cape Wrath this year, we hardly saw you. We were like, where's Elaine? And you would be out all day. You'd get out early, you'd be out all day, and we might see you at the end of the day. So it was quite funny.
I was knackered after that week.
Well, we always say that working on the events in whatever capacity can be just as challenging as taking part sometimes. I think maybe now's just a good moment to say, Charlotte, I think you've already shared links to Elaine and Debs's various websites or Instagram pages. And if you haven't had the opportunity to go and look at some of the art already, I would strongly suggest you do that.
Debs, do you have a website, or is it just your Instagram page?
I'm completely rubbish at all this social media, as you know. It's on. Unlike Elaine, it's not my career. It's something that I'm just doing because I enjoy it in my retirement. I don't really want it to become a massive career. So, and I'm just rubbish at all the Facebook and Instagram stuff. But it's there. I'm trying to do bits. So
I have linked to Instagram, and then I've seen, Elaine, you've got a website, so I've linked to that as well. But if there's any links, just let me know and I can pop them in the chat for everybody.
Do we have any questions? I've seen Sean's hand was up a moment ago. Sure.
There is a question in the chat. So this is for, well, both actually. Where was each of your favourite locations on the Cape Wrath Trail to paint, and why?
That's a good question. Elaine, would you like to have a go at that first? Then we'll come back to Debs.
I've got two. Day 2, I've forgotten the loch. It's the bit before the, the traverse at the end.
Loch was Kinloch Horn. Is it Loch Horn? It must be.
It's just Loch Horn, yeah. So that is just beautiful. And then Sandwich Bay is just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it feels like you've kind of reached the end when you get to Sandwich Bay as well.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they're both absolutely spectacular places. And for anyone who's listening as a Cape Wrath novice or newbie, I would just say do not underestimate the last 10 kilometres along the loch of Kinloch Horn, because it is nothing like you were ever going to expect by looking on the map. Debs, how about yourself? Where were you most inspired to paint at Cape Wrath?
Well, for me, because I was concentrating on the runners and the people, I just liked places where I was going to see a lot of people. So I think on day 2, I hiked up to Corrigally Bothy, which is only a little bit into the race, but I was able to kind of see just about everybody come past.
Right.
But there's so many places. I think if I was to choose a place to go and paint both people and scenery, it would probably be coming through the Fisher Fields on day 5. Landscape parts. And even when I was doing the event, I think day 5 is probably one of my favourite days, because it's the majestic scenery, but also this shorter day, you're not chasing. Well, I wasn't chasing the cut-offs, and I could actually stop and enjoy momentarily the scenery without being cut off, really.
I very clearly remember when I hiked the trail before, as well as a recce, before creating the race, walking with my wife Heather. We came out of Kinloch Heugh, and you go along that kind of riverside path, starting the Fisherfield view kind of opening up in front of you, and suddenly you're aware of this just incredible expansive view of Scottish landscape at its best. And I always say, when you have those moments, you could be in many different places in the world. It could be New Zealand, but it's not. It's in Scotland, and it's basically on our back door. And if you want an adventure, it's right there. And whether you go and hike it in your own time or you choose to take part in the race, it's just there on your doorstep. Charlotte, I know we had some questions coming in on social media, so do you want to run through some of those?
Yes, there's a good couple of questions here from Fiona. She wants to know how to be quicker on the steep downhills when she's scared of face planting into rocks.
Okay. Well,
She said, is it all in the mind? Or any tips that you've got?
Well, I think both Elaine and Debs are entirely qualified to answer that. So let's hand over to them. Elaine, do you want to go first? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not the best descender. I think about it too much and worry about knocking my teeth out. But I think you do have to just practice on grassy terrain, and then slightly more knobbly, and then even rougher and rougher, and switch up your brain a bit. Yeah.
I'm less good at going downhill now. I think the shock absorbers are just not quite working as they used to. It used to be my favourite bit, because I'm quite bold, maybe slightly mad, but I used to love hurtling downhill and passing those road runners in the little fell races that we did in Peak District. Sadly, as kind of birthdays are catching up with me, I'm not as good at running downhill. But as Elaine said, it's just practice and trying not to hold back, but just lots of practice.
Yeah, switching the mind off and just kind of going and enjoying. How much of the Cape Wrath would you say you do fast hiking compared to running?
Probably very, whether it's me or Elaine that you're asking. I don't know what in percentages. I don't really measure things like that. I'm rubbish at measuring things. But I just had to run where I could on the long days, especially on day 3 and day 6. If it was possible to run, I ran because I knew the cut-offs otherwise. But most of the uphill, it was a fast hiking.
Yep. Also. Walk up. Yeah. Somebody said walk up, walk up, jog
the flats.
Jog the flats and run the downhills. That's a good tip. That's good advice. I'm just going to have a look and see.
So, I mean, I will add to that in that as a race organizer, I very deliberately set out to create races for runners, and both Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath in particular, the longer days can only really be done if you do a certain percentage of running. You absolutely do not need to run the whole time, but you do need to adopt a, hike uphill, jog where you can, run a bit on the downhills. That said, both Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath have been completed by people who just walked. There was a German guy, I'm trying to remember his name, it's just gone out of my mind. I can picture him perfectly at Cape Wrath this year, who walked the entire race from Fort William to Cape Wrath. And it was quite funny because the runners were complaining at the end of the day that it had been overtaken by the walker. But he was so strong, he just, marched at 5 kilometers an hour with his poles, regardless of the terrain. So it can be done. It can be done, but certainly if you're going to adopt a more walking than running approach, you do need to be a very strong and consistent walker.
Yeah. Definitely. I can't remember who that was, the German guy from Cape Wrath.
There was a woman, 22, called Izzy, who came from Lewis. I spent quite a lot of time with her, and she was a really fast walker. She didn't do much, more or less the whole thing.
Nice.
Yeah. Elaine, maybe from the front of the race, you can talk about kind of the percentage of running versus walking, because I think there's a misconception that your top runners are running everything.
It's like Charlotte said, well, there's a certain gradient where you know that you're going to be hiking just as fast as you can run. So it's adopting that, but it's making sure that you're moving all the time and you're moving with purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, back to you, Charlotte.
I'm just going for questions. We're jumping on to Great Lakeland 3-day. In fact, no, what's your favourite part about multi-stage races? What's the, yeah, both of you, what's your favourite part of it?
For me, I think what I love is just the single focus. You know, life is super busy. There's always loads of things to do when you're at home. But what I like about the multi-stage is basically all you do is run or walk, eat and sleep, and then do that. So it's the kind of linear nature, A to B, and the kind of simplicity of every day.
Did you find that you had a routine every day that you stuck to?
Yeah, more or less, because especially second time round, yeah, I did have a routine, and it feels comforting, and you know what's coming, and always work. But if you've got that kind of routine to stick to, it's kind of
yeah. We called it kind of a Scottish bubble, didn't we, this summer? It felt like a little holiday for us because we were working, but the sun was wonderful. But it's just when you're in Scotland, and it's just like you said, you just switch off from the world, don't you? Because all you've got to think about is each day just getting to the next overnight camp, and then the following day doing the same until you get to the end.
Yeah, I just didn't want to come home. I worked really hard on the art stuff, but I just stayed up for another 4 days in that bubble on my own. So
that's brilliant. Elaine, were you keen to get home at the end of Cape Wrath, or how were you feeling?
I was absolutely exhausted this time. So I was quite pleased to get home because I was doing big long days and obsessing over painting at night. But yeah, the multi-stage is really special because you do get the opportunity to rest or sleep, and it is it's getting to know. So our tent mates in Cape Wrath were amazing when I did it last year, and that was part of how special the event was, because you just spend people that you wouldn't normally spend time with.
Yeah, new people that you didn't know the day before, and then all of a sudden you're sharing a tent, you're sharing the trails, and you make new friends.
Yeah.
Amazing. What's one piece of kit that you took with you that you couldn't have gone without for the Cape Wrath? I think, Debs, I spoke to you about this on event, didn't I? What did you I think your answer.
it's a really, but I will stick with it. So I took with me a very cheap, lightweight plastic shoehorn. Cost me imagine every morning, if you've late in at night, your shoes are stinking, muddy, horrible, wet. The next morning you've got clean hands and you're trying to squash really sore feet into horrible wet shoes. Having this little plastic shoehorn was just a godsend. And it was a godsend to all other 7 tent mates I had.
It's so simple, isn't it? But I can imagine every morning trying to get your, like you said, like sweaty, muddy, horrendous shoes on. If you just got a shoehorn.
Bog. So just having bliss.
Amazing.
Elaine, let's ask you the same question.
I'm not sure I've got one. K-tape is a godsend. Apart from that, one of our tent mates brought a washing line to hang up the washing in the tent. So that was good.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Oh, inside the tent?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So it's a bit of a stinky tent.
Yes, I can imagine.
I think all the tents are quite stinky by
the end of it. Yeah.
I'll let everybody into a bit of news in terms of this webinar, as we are starting to investigate replacing all of our blue tents. So I think some of them are reaching the end of their lives. I think it's likely that Dragon's Back will be the last edition for our current stock of blue tents. So people next year will have nice, well, hopefully nice new tents to.
Exciting times ahead.
I think what should we go for next? Sorry, I've absolutely not followed our list of questions. I don't think I've ever once followed the list of questions.
You did throw me before when you were like, over to you, Charlotte, and I was like, sorry. I'm not at all prepared for this.
Let's bring it back to the art, because that was the topic of tonight's webinar. And I think over the last however many webinars we've done now, we've talked a lot about favourite races and strategies and nutrition and hydration and kit, and we all know that people are interested in this. But I'm actually interested in the art, because I find art like mysterious. I can't draw, I can't paint, and when I watch an artist at work, I am mesmerized by what they do and how it works. So, like, maybe let's start with Elaine. Perhaps you could just talk us through maybe more the technical process. Do you literally start with a blank piece of paper and start with the acrylics and go from there? Just talk me through it. How do we go from nothing to the finished product?
Nothing to something. I suppose that I've got that image in my head, and then it's the blank piece of canvas, and you start with the light coloured paints, doing, like, I don't know, sketch out what you want to do, and then I usually pick like 3 or 4 colours that I'm going to use depending on my mood. I start with the sky, and then it just builds from there. A lot of it is lots of layers. Sometimes it works, and some days it just, it infuriates me some days how long it takes.
Does it again, I kind of assume that every time you start painting on a canvas, the finished result is like one of these wonderful prints I've got on my wall. But I mean, what's the ratio of success, I'm happy with this painting and I will sell it, to I'm going to put this one behind the door and maybe not show anyone?
Yeah, so I usually paint a bit to a certain, I don't know, a certain stage, and then I'll leave it and come back to it, and I kind of know if I want to add more to it or if it's just not what I'd hoped it to be, and then it'll get painted over.
Okay.
So there's lots of iterations of the paintings usually.
Do you have a strong sense then when you're finished that it's done and you're happy, or are you tempted to keep going back and back?
I think I know when I'm like happy with it. So something happens. It's usually just like a few brush strokes or just a tiny bit of colour that kind of, I feel, brings it all together, and then it's finished.
Right.
So there's some sort of sense that I'm happy with it. If I start painting it, it's not right.
Okay. Maybe it's kind of the same question to Debs. You start with a blank canvas. What's the process for your finished? Because one of the amazing things about Debs when we're at the events is the quantity of the work you're producing every day is amazing. I mean, every day there's new watercolors and new sketches, and it's phenomenal.
Working on Dragon's Back and Cape Wrath has been really good for me, because I'm a classic artist in that I tend to overwork stuff, and if you overwork watercolors, you can't bring them back. Acrylics are very different. You can kind of work with it for longer, and actually working on Cape Wrath and Dragon's Back, because I wanted to produce several paintings a day, just had to bang them out. And probably there's times, if I'd have been at home and had more time, I'd have put it aside, come back to it, done some more, and yes, it might have been better, but it was a really interesting exercise. You just do it, think that's enough, move on to the next one. And yes, some of them I would have probably liked to do more on them, but the participants seem to like them, so
Well, I absolutely know. I know some of the participants who have ended up with one of your paintings, and I know they are all absolutely delighted with their personal paintings. They count that as an absolute highlight to have, an original piece of artwork featuring them. So there's some proud paintings on some happy walls in people's houses around this country.
I think with something like Cape Wrath or Dragon's Back, if you've just run 400 kilometres and there's a scribble that looks very vaguely like you, they're probably it anyway. So they're very critical, whereas I'm super critical of my own work, but I'm learning to just kind of let go and just do it. And if people like it, they can purchase it. And if not, that's not a problem. Just move on to the next one. But going back to the blank piece of paper, when I work on my own at home, I'm quite intimidated by this white piece of paper. So I quite like just sloshing on some backgrounds and then see where it takes me. Styles. It's not one I've used on Cape Wrath. I think I did a little bit on when I've sketched at GL3D. I bought little sketchbooks into them, and I find that much easier to get going. That big piece of white paper is really intimidating sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was gonna jump back to Elaine for the following question. So I was wondering, if you could paint any race in the world, where would you go?
No.
Sorry, this is blindsiding everyone with these questions.
I think this September I'm going to be quite captivated. I'm doing UTMR, and I'm sure there's scenes on that are just going to be amazing. But there's too many races, aren't there?
There's so many good races. I ran the UTMR with a really good running friend of mine a couple of years ago, kind of hut to hut over 4 days. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's but personally I feel it's a far better. Oh, sorry, somebody's asking what is UTMR. It's the Ultra Tour de Monte Rosa. So Lizzie Hawker, who was and still is a phenomenal ultra runner, winner of UTMB, has set some incredible records over the years. She lives part-time in Switzerland and created the Ultra Tour de Monte Rosa. It's kind of like a low-key version of the UTMB. It's in a different valley. It's the week before UTMB. And if you want to go on a hiking running adventure, as I did it with my friend Duncan, and I've also done the Tour de Mont Blanc route. On the Tour de Mont Blanc, you will see hundreds of people every day. On the Tour de Monte Rosa, you might see a dozen people in a day, and it's more beautiful. So go figure which is worth doing. Obviously, Tour de Mont Blanc has the big global reputation, but Tour de Monte Rosa, wow, what a journey. So Elaine, I'm confident you'll have a brilliant time. Yeah, Debs, how about yourself? Where would you go?
I think if I stick with my kind of people, I love painting emotions. Pick a race, maybe something like the Barkley Marathons.
I thought you would say that.
Yeah, same.
There's this 5, and I reckon the participants would look very different from on loop 1, the end of loop 1, 5, and capturing the change in their emotions and their physicality would be really interesting to do.
On the Dragon's Back race, probably 2017 or 19, where Ian Corliss took some photographs of all the participants. He did a portrait, black and white portrait at registration, and then he did a black and white portrait on the finish line. And you could see the deterioration in everybody, and everyone looked, puffy from all the stress response from the race, and drawn and haggard and tired. And it'd be great to do a painting version of that, and pick out a few runners, and maybe that's the next project, Debs.
Yeah, well, I remember there's on Cape Wrath. I looked reasonably okay on day 1, and then my face just got puffier and puffier right up until the end of it. So yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, and again, for those who maybe haven't experienced that, the kind of body's stress response to that, the physical assault of running day after day after day, is releasing cortisone, which causes you to retain more fluid, which makes you puffy. So it's quite a common thing that you see at these kind of ultra or very challenging endurance events. It doesn't need to be an ultra running race. It could be mountain biking or other things. Okay. Do we have some questions in there,
Yes, there's
Charlotte?
a
Sorry,
really yeah, sorry, Shane. There's a really wonderful question from Callum, for both of you. So how do you switch off the desire to stop and draw or paint when you need to run in an event? Elaine, do you want to go first?
Oh, in an event, I would.
Yeah, so if you're running, if you're racing,
No, it just
but
wouldn't
then you
happen.
see something. What was that? It doesn't.
My phone's in the bottom of my bag. If I'm racing, I'm not stopping. Unless
Debs, what about you?
Really, you know, if I'm in an event, I don't have time to stop and sketch and draw. So I don't take any equipment, so I can't do it.
Yeah.
Having a little sketchbook on GL3D because it's really flexible and you can do what you want. And I did stop at a few places. And that was lovely, actually, because when I'm out running or walking or hiking with Mel, my husband, I'll say, oh, I'm going to just stop and sketch here. And 2 minutes in, he's going, have you finished yet? Not patient. So it's something I have to do on my own. Yeah, if I'm in an event, a race, I just wouldn't take any kit. So
there's another question, I'm just reading it. Do you see each day as a big white sheet, or are you well prepared for each day? Does that mean in terms of tackling the day, the distance and the events? I don't know.
I'm not quite sure I understand that. Oh, yes.
Yes, yeah. So do you see each day, is it a case of do you see the Cape Wrath as a whole event, or do you break it down each day and do you see do you kind of segment it?
it's a bit of both, really. You know, each day is pretty long, so there's, you know, aspects of, you know, you can break each day into sections, but yes, you treat each day separately, but you also have to remember that it is part of 8 days. And so going full out on day one, just because you see it as one day, is not going to do you any good. So you do have to keep in mind that it's an 8-day event.
So there was another question I'd just seen in the chat. So I'm still operating off my phone. I think quite a few of us are this evening. I'm not sure what's happened here. But Charlotte, can you see the question about your equipment? I couldn't quite see.
Yes, the one from Virginie. Let me have a look. It's just clicked. I love a bit of art myself, but I tend to take a picture and then to draw pastel at home. How do you keep your equipment dry, and how do you store your work when you are en route?
So for me, I was lucky. For Cape Wrath, there was only one day that was a bit rainy. So that was fortunate, and a lot of the days were quite hot, so the paint was just drying really quickly. So it was fine by the time I kind of packed up and left.
And for me, because I was working in watercolour, obviously, if it rains, it just washes your painting off the paper. I tended to revert to painting in my camper van. But also, an added problem is when it's really, really hot, watercolour just dries far too quickly and you can't move the paint around. So it's tricky finding quite just the right conditions. Hot days on. Yeah.
I can imagine. We were joking before we went up to Cape Wrath, weren't we, Shane? We were saying what kind of weather we were hoping for, and you were like, just a gentle breeze of about 7 miles an hour with a bit of heat to keep the midges away. No rain. And then we ended up having glorious heat for the first few days, didn't we? And then it rained in the middle, and then it was hot again. It's like a Scottish little holiday. There's another question that's come in. Do you have a particular style of painting, realism versus more impressionism, etc., you lean toward when creating your art, or is there a particular style preferred by participants? Debs?
So, yeah, participants like to see, well, for me, they like to see themselves, like to recognise themselves. So when I work more for myself, it tends to be not abstract, but a little bit more kind of impressionistic. But I've particularly realised that runners, they really like to see their shoes properly. So I spend a lot of money on their shoes. Normally I might just do a little stroke and think that'll do for a foot, but actually runners think, oh, I've got my Sauconys on, I've got my what, you know, with rucksacks and kits. So I spend quite a lot of time getting little details right because the participants really like that. But a bit freer and looser and a bit more impressionistic.
That's a brilliant observation. Really. Elaine, why don't you kind of comment? You're a bit more impressionistic, am I right?
A bit more impressionistic. It's just the mountains, and yeah, it just depends on how I'm feeling a lot of the time. So I've got a hike up neck that's really dark and moody because that's on the spine, and when I've hit it in the spine, it's been pretty horrible place. And then there's happier ones.
Brilliant. I think Charlotte, have we got any more questions that are lined
Not
up?
in the chat. No, I think these questions have all been answered. Thank you so much for sending them in and everybody answering as well.
Yeah, I think maybe it's probably reached a good logical time to wrap up there, and I'd like to apologise for the tech problems we had earlier on. We actually start the presenters ourselves. We all get together at 1:45 to give ourselves 15 minutes to sort out the tech problems, and it was counting down to 7 o'clock this evening, and we still couldn't see each other or talk to each other. So it was a little bit of a stressful start for all of us here.
Restarting a computer with 1 minute to go, like go.
So yeah, I just want to apologise for everybody, and I'd like to just say a huge thanks to Elaine and Debs for giving us their time this evening, and for Charlotte, who's still in the office. I'm actually at home at the moment, but Charlotte is holding the fort, literally.
There's nobody here, it's very quiet.
So yeah, thank you everybody for your time, and I hope that you can see some of Elaine and Deb's art at some point. Maybe I'll actually put a shout out. Elaine is at UTMR in September. Debs, you have another arrangement, so we don't have an artist in residence for Dragon's Back. So if you're interested and you think you could come to the event and paint or draw, we would love to hear from you. So there we go. We'll wrap up there. Thank you very much. As I hit end, it's a fairly abrupt end, and I disappear. I think if you want to stay on chatting, as you will be here until you leave. But
it will still be recording unless everybody leaves.
It does record what you say, yeah. Good
just
reminder.
so you know, it does still record.
So yeah, wonderful. Thank you everybody, and good night.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks, bye.